Tonight, we open a folder that was never meant to be printed, 30 photos, 1 CC line, and a love that disappeared between sent and reply all. Sometimes I need space doesn't mean freedom. It means there's already someone standing in it. This is the confession of a 38-year-old wife from Surrey, England. A story about distance, discovery, and the price of pretending you're fine. Her name has been changed. Her words have not. Let's begin.
I left my wedding ring in the little ceramic dish by the sink, just for tonight. By morning, the groove on my finger felt colder than the tiles. People think marriages end with shouting. Sometimes they end with a dish that stays full. I slept without the ring and drove before sunrise. Surrey mist, M25 humming, radio on the shipping forecast. Tom and I had been married 10 years, no kids. Just a house in Surrey, 2 cups of coffee every morning, and a rhythm too quiet to notice it was dying. He's kind, the kind of man who folds laundry before bed, who checks the car tires before I drive down the M25. But lately, when he looked at me across the breakfast table, I felt nothing. Not anger, not love, just stillness. One morning he asked, "You okay?" I smiled. "I'm fine, just tired." I'd said it so many times it stopped being a lie. It became routine, like rinsing the same cup every day. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my hair, and didn't recognize the woman staring back. 38, a decent career, a mortgage, a husband who still left the porch light on, and yet, completely hollow. Laura, my colleague and best friend, had been telling me for months, "You've lost yourself, love. You do everything for everyone else." At first, I laughed it off, but one night, after another silent dinner, I said the sentence that split our lives in two. "Tom, I think I need space. I need to find who I am again." He didn't shout. He didn't ask why. He just looked down, thumb tracing the rim of his mug, and said, "If that's what you need, I'll wait." That was somehow worse than anger, because kindness makes leaving harder. Laura offered me her guest room. Her flat was closer to the office. She said it'd make sense for now. When I arrived, she poured 2 glasses of red wine and said, "You're doing the right thing. 10 years is a long time to feel unseen." Her flat smelled of perfume and candle wax, the kind of freedom that hums like temptation. She laughed, "Welcome back to yourself," and I almost believed her. That night, I texted Tom, "I'm safe." "Don't worry." He replied within minutes, "Drive safe, love you." 3 words I didn't have the courage to answer. A week at Laura's turned into a month. I told Tom it was temporary, just until I figured things out. He believed me. He always believed me. Laura's flat was closer to the office. It meant later nights, shared cabs, and too many bottles of wine that ended with someone saying, "You deserve to feel alive again." I started commuting from Surrey at odd hours, M25 before sunrise, Pret napkins in my bag. At 4 p.m., someone always offered tea, not answers. At work, there was Daniel, tall, calm, with that quiet sort of charm that doesn't ask for attention. It just draws you in. He led our creative team. I'd known him for years, but suddenly he seemed different. Or maybe I was. He romanticized everything. Meetings were scenes, decks were poems with graphs. Charming, and careless with boundaries. One evening we stayed late, finalizing a pitch deck. He looked up from his laptop and said, "You've got this heaviness about you lately. Everything okay?" I laughed it off. "Just married life." He smiled a little sadly. Some people are better at pretending than being happy. Something inside me cracked open. We started emailing after hours, first about work, then jokes, then those lines you read twice before bed, because they make you feel seen. Laura noticed. She always noticed. When Daniel walked me to my car, she'd grin and whisper, "Finally, someone wakes you up." I'd roll my eyes, but inside, I felt light again, wanted. Laura had a way of turning rules into doors. She'd been passed over for promotion twice. Daniel wasn't her favorite person either. "If they won't see you at work," she said, "let someone else see you properly." Then came her offer I should have feared most. Laura blocked my calendar with client NDA review, forwarded a note to HR. She's off-site with the agency. She booked the retreat and added my name last. "If you're going to find yourself," she said, "I can make sure no one looks." One Friday, Daniel and I left for that lakeside hotel. Nothing happened at first. We talked for hours, laughed like teenagers. But the second night, he brushed my hand when I passed him a drink, and I didn't move away. The moment was small enough to ignore, yet I knew exactly what it meant. When I came back to Laura's flat, she was waiting with tea and that knowing smile. "You look different," she said. I whispered, "Nothing happened." She smirked, "Not yet." A week later, Daniel emailed a folder, campaign reference. Inside were 30 photos and the thread. "Back in 2:14. Your laugh is in my head. 23:41. 7:30 by the lake. No cameras, promise. 00:03. Don't overthink. You're allowed to feel alive. 00:17. CC, Laura. Us, at the lake, at the bar, laughing over coffee. Moments that should have been ordinary, but weren't. Because of the way he looked at me, because of the way I didn't look away. I stared at the screen, heart pounding so loud it drowned the quiet flat. Then I did the worst thing possible. I didn't delete them. I moved the folder into my work drive, renamed it Campaign Materials, a place Tom would never find. It happened on a Sunday morning. Grey light through the kitchen window. The kind that softens everything, even the truth. I came home to pick up a few clothes. Tom was at the table, folding laundry, the way he always did. He looked calm, too calm. On the counter sat a neat stack of printed pages, 30 of them. At the top, the subject line, Campaign Materials. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. He didn't shout, didn't even look at me at first. He just said, "You left your laptop open." Then he pushed the stack slightly forward. "Thought maybe you'd want these back." The top page had my subject lines circled in pencil, dates underlined. He'd read like a man trying to prove a fire wasn't smoke. It wasn't the photos. It was how neatly he'd arranged them, like evidence handled with care. There were captions I'd written to Daniel, half flirty, half guilty, lines that sounded like someone else's voice. And then the photos, our reflections in glass, our hands, that one blurred kiss I swore no one saw. I whispered, "Tom, He interrupted quietly. "How long?" I wanted to lie, but the truth had already started speaking for me. "A few months." He nodded once. No tears, no anger, just that heavy, terrible quiet. Then, after a breath, "Did you end us first? Or start him first?" He said, "I kept waiting for you to come back. I thought you needed space." Then his voice cracked. "I didn't know you needed someone else in it." He paused, then said, "If I'd checked sooner, I'd be a snoop. If I check now, I'm a fool. Which one do you want me to be?" When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. Not from crying, but from staying awake too long with the truth. He said softly, "I printed them so I'd stop checking if they were drafts." Then he added, "The timestamps loved you back." My throat burned. I said the only thing that felt true. I was happy. I just forgot. He stood up, picked up his mug. I'll delete the account after you leave. Then he walked upstairs. No shouting, no doors, just footsteps. Slow, final. That night, I couldn't stay at Laura's. Her flat felt tainted, too many secrets in the wallpaper. I drove to a hotel instead, parked the car, sat there for hours, hands gripping the wheel like I could reverse time. At 3 a.m., Tom texted, just one line. I packed the rest of your things. They're in the hallway. No name, no goodbye. I stared at that message until the phone dimmed. For the first time in months, I cried until the sun came up. I moved into a small flat in Surrey. A second-hand sofa. 2 plants I kept forgetting to water. A kettle that screamed like it held a grudge. It was quiet. Not the safe kind of quiet, but the kind that makes you listen to yourself. I started therapy on a Thursday. The room smelled of paper and peppermint. My therapist asked, "What are you hoping to get back?" I said, "My life," then paused. Or at least, a version of me that doesn't need someone else to prove I matter. I wrote a note and pinned it on the fridge. No texts, no calls, no just checking you're okay. I emailed HR to remove me from Daniel's projects, declined the bonus tied to that retreat account. HR logged a conflict of interest note against my file, 12 months on record. I asked to move to a non-client internal role for a quarter. Pay cut, clean slate. It was a strange kind of repentance, quiet paperwork instead of prayer. Week 2, I deleted Daniel's number, not because I didn't think of him, but because every thought pulled me further from the woman I was trying to rebuild. We never met again. He changed teams. Work went back to being just work. I wrote Tom a formal apology, not to persuade, just to witness the harm. I listed what I'd taken: time, trust, Sunday quiet. Laura texted once, "You're angry at the wrong person. You were unhappy." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then typed, "Unhappiness isn't a license to harm the person who loved me most." I didn't send it. I just archived the chat and put the kettle on. Weeks later, she called again. "You'll thank me one day." I answered softly, "I'll forgive you sooner if you stop saying that." I asked Laura one question. If I'd stayed, would you have stopped me? She didn't answer. That was an answer. Nights were the hardest. There's a particular sound an empty flat makes, like a held breath. I learned to fill it, washing up slowly, leaving the radio on low, reading before bed instead of scrolling through emails I no longer had. On the 30th day, I packed a small box for Tom. Things he might want back. Our wedding photos, the scarf I stole from him that first winter, a key that no longer belonged to me. I left it on the doorstep with a note. Just his name. No apology on paper could hold what needed to be said aloud. We met once, at a cafe near the old house. Rain on the windows. 2 mugs between us like patient referees. He looked thinner. I probably did too. He said, "How are you?" I said, "Trying." Then I told him the truth I'd avoided for months. I confused freedom with validation. I wanted to feel chosen, and I chose the most cowardly way to prove it. He didn't rescue me from the silence. He didn't owe me that. Finally, he said, "Thank you for not making me the villain." I cried for the life we were good at, the Sunday shops and the shared lists, the ordinary holiness of knowing someone's coffee order without asking. We didn't talk about starting again. We were careful not to invent a future we couldn't keep. Before he left, he said, "I'm not sure we come back from this, but I hope you find a self you can live with." There are blessings that hurt more than punishments. That was one of them. In therapy, I practiced telling the story without defending it. Not a romance, not a tragedy, just a sequence of choices revealing who I was when no one was watching. On the 90th day, I woke before my alarm. Light pooled over the kitchen tiles like new paint. I made tea. I stood by the window and said out loud, "I was loved. I forgot. I remember now." That afternoon, I recorded this confession, not to ask the internet to fix me, not to win sympathy, but because there's a kind of loneliness you only heal by admitting the worst thing you've done, and then living differently after. If you're listening and you're telling someone you need space, please check what you're really running from. Is it the marriage or the mirror? If you want freedom, don't buy it with someone else's heart. Tom, if you ever hear this, thank you for the gentleness I didn't deserve. I don't know if we'll sign papers or keep learning how to breathe on different streets, but I'll spend the rest of my life making sure space means honesty, not an alibi. I keep the ceramic dish by the sink. Most nights it's empty. Some endings are just a dish that finally means what it looks like. And to the woman I used to be, you were enough before anyone chose you. You'll be enough after.
What would you have done if you found those emails? Would you print them or pretend they never existed? If this story made you pause tonight, maybe it's because we've all felt that quiet distance before it breaks. Here on The Confession Stories, every truth you send starts a new conversation about love, regret, and the way we learn to be honest again. If you have a story you've never told, send it to us, because someone, somewhere, is waiting to hear that they're not the only one. This was The Confession Stories. Thank you for listening, and remember, every secret sounds different when it's finally spoken aloud.